Sci-fi. It's one of the most popular genres of our day and age. Each year, moviegoers fill up theaters to watch stories about epic space battles, distant planets, spooky aliens, and futuristic technology. Science fiction rules the cinematic landscape. But when did it start? Wind the clock way back, before pulp magazines, before Jules Verne, before H.G. Wells, and before that weird black and white French movie, all the way to ancient Greece in the 2nd century, and you'll find a writer by the name of Lucian. Lucian of Samosata, a wildly popular satirist who delighted audiences with over-the-top stories chock full of exaggerated humor, which he used to ridicule various superstitions, religions, and even political figures. He wrote a ton of stuff and was so beloved that more than 80 of his stories are still around to this day. Read through most of them now and you'll probably think to yourself,
well, that was total trash.
But that's because we're not the target audience. Lucian wrote about and poked fun at the culture of his time. He wrote stories that would be appealing to his main readership, namely the educated upper class of Greece. If his works seem boring, unfunny, or confusing, it's because we're almost 2,000 years removed from his witty, referential humor. One such tale is Lucian of Samosata's A True Story, which goes on record as the earliest known science fiction book. It's a tale of outer space exploration, aliens, interplanetary warfare, and cutting-edge technology, and it was written during the days of wooden ships and horse-drawn chariots. So two of the most popular genres throughout the Roman Empire at the time were the travelogue and the debate. Travelogues were sort of half guidebooks, half journals. Men would journey to distant lands and return home to publish their findings. Debates were written arguments between highly respected public figures who would go back and forth about particular philosophical or political ideas. Lucian hated both of these genres with a passion. At least, he hated what they had become. Travelogues had gone the sensationalist route. Writers often embellished and over-exaggerated their discoveries, publishing outright lies as facts in order to stay relevant. And debates, Lucian felt, tended to be long-winded and too highbrow, with each side usually bickering over the semantics of ultimately trivial or unknowable matters. With these two best-selling genres in mind, Lucian penned his satire in which the main character travels to outer space and meets fantastic sermonizing deities. A travelogue and debate rolled together. So what's the story? Page 1 begins with Lucian prefacing that the entire book is a work of fiction, which would have thrown the readership for a loop because back in those days, travelogues claimed to be fact. Lucian then muses about the sad state of the genre. He calls out writers like Theseus and Homer, and he complains about some of his contemporaries who he believed had ruined the publishing business by fabricating larger-than-life stories that they then sell to a stupid readership. He refuses to mention any such authors by name, but assures his readers that after they get further into his story, it'll become clear who he takes issue with. Then he rather laughably admits that despite his frustrations about their tactics, it's not like he can do any better. Nothing noteworthy has ever really happened to him either, so if he can't beat him, might as well join him. If he has to lie to sell books, at least he can be more noble than his competitors by openly admitting it. Lucian then writes, "I confidently pronounce that truthfully I lie. I write of matters which I neither saw nor suffered, nor heard by reports from people I made up. Let no man, therefore, in any case, believe any of these words." This is an awesome preface. Lucian then begins an account of his made-up journey. Wanting to explore the world, he gathers a crew of 50 men into a large wooden ship, and they set out from the Pillars of Hercules, or as we know it today, the Strait of Gibraltar. Finding a fair wind, they head for the Western Ocean. The ship is stocked full of provisions for a long journey, and they've hired an expert pilot to guide them to the end of the earth. They travel for a day and a night, and the next morning sail into a huge and terrifying tempest. With no way to push through, they ride the storm out for 79 days. On day 80, the storm clears and they spot a nearby island to land on. 30 men stay behind to guard the ship, and a party of 20 men venture out to look for supplies and find a slab of bronze on the island that indicates Hercules and Dionysus had been there, along with a pair of massive footprints as proof. The scouting party pays their respects to the gods and then continue ahead to find a river full of wine. The fish they catch and eat from it make the men drunk, and determined to find the source of the river, Lucian and his crew head upstream to find a number of large grapevines full of clusters. Except, follow me here, the trees are all in the shape of women. Luckily, the tree ladies speak Greek and invite the men to kiss them. Two of the voyagers, sick with lust, embrace the trees and begin kissing them passionately, but it's a trap! The pair are snared by the branches and transformed into trees as well. Lucian's party then hightails it out of there, hops back onto the ship, and sets out, leaving the doomed men behind. By noon, the island is out of sight, and the ship is caught up in a great whirlwind. The entire vessel is pulled out of the water and thrust into outer space, and the men raise the sails and catch a fair wind. They thought space had wind back then, give them a break. For 7 days, they sail through space, and on day 8, they arrive at the moon. Turns out the moon is full of cities, and Lucian's ship is stopped by a group of hippogrippines, or as some modern translations put it, vulture dragoons, men who ride on the backs of massive birds. They function as a sort of moon police force, and they arrest Lucian's party and bring them before King Endymion. Endymion turns out to be a human, and luckily speaks Greek. He's overjoyed to have guests of his own kind, and promises to care for them during their stay. It turns out the Moon Kingdom is in the middle of a war with the Sun Kingdom. Endymion had planned to colonize the planet Venus, but the rival King Phaeton sent his own soldiers, ant dragoons, ahead to Venus first, and now the two kingdoms are locked in a fierce conflict over who gets to keep the planet. Endymion asks Lucian if he and his men want to join this war effort, and finding nothing else better to do, they agree. They're each supplied with armor and a giant vulture to fly. The next day, 100,000 moon soldiers team up with almost 1 million other galactic allies to face off against the army of the sun in an
Epic space battle.
Infantry includes grass plumes, large birds covered in grass with lettuce wings, vulture dragoons, and archers riding atop elephant-sized fleas. Endymion commissions island-sized spiders to weave a massive web in space to form a makeshift battlefield. One of them is named Owlet, son of Fairweather. I know this name has got to be some kind of like secret Easter egg or something. Why does he tell us that spider's name? Maybe it was a character from another popular story at the time from like an author he hated. Who knows? Anyway, Phaeton's sun army consists of dragoons riding atop 200 feet long ants, massive mosquitoes, men who fling poison radishes, men wielding asparagus spears and mushroom shields, and puppycorns, representatives of the dog star, who fight on the back of winged acorns. And I love this. Lucian goes into detail about how the Sun Army had like poor management. There were slingers Phaeton summoned from the Milky Way who didn't show up, and cloud centaurs who arrived just after the battle was over. Phaeton is so angry at their tardiness that he sends a firestorm upon the slingers' homeworld. It's such a weird thing to throw in. Pretty sure he's just like satirizing how certain travelogues would put in these random little details to make their stories seem more legitimate. Lucian recounts that for the Moon Kingdom, it was a glorious victory in which many were taken alive and many were slain, and that so much blood flowed on the clouds that they were dyed red, as they do when the sun is setting. After the battle, Lucian and 2 of his companions are mopping up when the enemy cloud centaurs finally arrive and take them prisoner. They're transported to the sun, and they meet Phaeton face to face. Phaeton decides to build a wall out of clouds to separate the sun from the moon. But Endymion has pity on their kingdom, not wanting them to live their lives in darkness. He sends a peace offering, and after 2 days of intense deliberation, Phaeton agrees and a treaty is made between the sun and the moon. The Sunnites agree to tear down the dividing wall and release their prisoners of war. In exchange, the Moonites agree to leave the stars unconquered. Both kingdoms agree to aid one another if ever attacked, and that each year Endymion pays Phaeton a tribute of 10,000 gallons of dew. Both kingdoms agree to share a joint colony on Venus. After being set free, Lucian and his friends are brought back to the moon, where they receive a hero's welcome. Endymion wants them to stay and join the colony, even offering his own son's hand in marriage. As Lucian states emphatically, there are no women on the moon. Lucian declines the offer and asks that his ship and crew be brought back to Earth. For the next week, while preparations are being made, Endymion entertains them, hoping they'll reconsider. Here, Lucian describes his week-long stay. There are no women. The men are wives for the first 25 years of life, and then become husbands. They can get pregnant and carry children in the calf of the leg instead of the belly. He goes into great detail about the Moonites' reproductive process, but I don't want to get into it. The moon is full of flying frogs, which are plucked from the air and eaten fried. All the moon men are born with 1 toe on each foot. They have honey instead of snot. They sweat milk instead of sweat. They use their bellies for pockets, and their clothes are made of glass. Their eyes are removable. Their ears are made of leaves. Don't you want to live there?
Forever.
Also on the moon is an interesting piece of technology, a huge plane of glass hanging over a shallow well that, when entered, can telegraph anything happening on the Earth. Lucian spies on his family back home through the glass and writes bluntly, "If you think I'm lying about any of this, go to the moon yourself, and you'll see that I'm telling the truth." This has got to be a line from one of his contemporaries that he's mocking. It has to be. After 7 days of lunar exploration, Lucian and his men load up on the ship. Endymion gives them armor for protection and then orders his royal guard to guide them back to Earth. The ship then sails to Lamp Town, a city so called because it is literally inhabited by floating sentient lamps. Each lamp has the name of a person on Earth, and they deliver reports of their assigned humans to a magistrate each evening. If a lamp is ever late for roll call or forsakes its duty, its flame is snuffed out forever. Lucian finds his lamp and asks it how his family is doing back home. The whole town weirds the men out, and they refuse an offer from the lamp to stay and eat. They quickly board the ship again and leave. They pass by the city of Cloud Cuckoo Town. The wind is too strong for them to make a stop. 4 days later, they reach a drop-off point, and the ship is finally lowered to Earth. Back on their home planet, the ocean is pleasant, and they sail at ease for 2 days. But on day 3, they're attacked by giant sea monsters, and a whale 187 1/2 miles long swallows the ship whole. The men say their goodbyes, believing this to be the end, but soon find themselves alive in the belly of the whale. Inside is an entire world, forests, animals, even civilizations. They meet other seamen who were swallowed too, and after visiting with them, Lucian recounts the histories of 6 different kingdoms of fish people who live in the whale's belly. Just like in space, these kingdoms are at war, and Lucian and his crew are unwittingly thrust right into the middle of it. They survive there for almost 2 years, until one day the whale opens his mouth and they catch sight of a mountain range outside. Tired of the never-ending belly wars, Lucian and his men concoct an escape plan. They set the forests on fire and wait for 13 days as the whale slowly dies from the inside. dead at last, the men use beams and open a small crack in the whale's mouth, which they sail out of. But my friends, this story doesn't even end there. Time would fail me to mention their 30-day adventure on the frozen ice, their hunting expedition on a desert island, their voyage through the Sea of Milk, or the island made of cheese, their run-in with the cork feet who can walk on water, or the island of the Blessed, where the central city is a sort of afterlife kingdom made of gold and the wall around it emerald. There, Lucian visits the veterans of the Trojan War and witnesses several important celestial court cases. He visits with Pythagoras and Homer, along with other important philosophical and political figures from the past. They gossip about men like Socrates and Diogenes, and probably my favorite line, Plato was not there. It was said that he was living in an imaginary city under the constitution and laws that he himself wrote. So spicy. They watch the sons of Greek gods participate in wrestling matches, foot races, and even war. 6 months on the island and a rebellion breaks out over an extramarital affair involving several key figures in the kingdom, and after the sedition is stopped, officials determine that Lucian and his party must leave the island before the rebels are sentenced for their crimes. Lucian weeps, not wanting to leave the great island, but the demigod Rhadamanthus assures him that one day he will be able to return, even showing him a chair that the gods have reserved for him. Rhadamanthus then sees Lucian off at the harbor, pointing out 6 great islands in the distance, saying, "When you have sailed by these, you will finally come to the great continent opposite the one which your people inhabit." Then, at last, after you have had many adventures and have traveled through all sorts of countries and lived among unfriendly men, in course of time, you will reach your homeland. He then plucks a marshmallow plant from the ground and hands it to Lucian, instructing him to pray to it if ever in trouble. The rest of the book recounts parts of the journey through the 6 great islands, where the men face all kinds of horrors and many die. Right in the middle of sailing between the land masses, a violent storm breaks out. The ship is wrecked into one of the islands, and the men spill out to explore the terrors that await them. Lucian then closes a true story by saying what happened on that island I shall tell you in the next book. And in one surviving copy, a disgruntled Greek scholar would write in the margins, "This is Lucian's greatest lie of all." He never wrote a sequel. Hope you enjoyed that story. This video has been sponsored by Storyblocks. Lucian's true story is full of crazy off-the-wall imagery, and the tools I found on Storyblocks helped bring it to life. Storyblocks' unlimited all-access plan gave me a royalty-free library full of videos, images, music, and sound effects, providing me with plenty of editing resources and reference material. Maybe you want to make videos too, and you've been looking for a way to easily fill your projects with high-quality audio and visuals. Look no further than Storyblocks. Choose a subscription plan that works within your budget and you'll get full access, not just stock footage. They've even got project templates for Adobe After Effects and Premiere Pro. Storyblocks helps creators save time, make more, and get inspired. You can create your own stories, and they can help. Check them out using the link in this video's description.